Hey everyone, welcome back to Convention Circuit Entertainer Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott J. Carroll. Today we have a very special episode. Because we have twice as many guests, we're actually going to be going twice as long. So we have that to look forward to. Today's guests are a couple of wonderful guys who are filmmakers, movie aficionados, writers, and the minds behind Dark Corners reviews. Guys, please help me welcome Robin Bales and Graham Trelfer. Guys?
How you doing? I was expecting a little bit of canned applause then.
I wish we had that. Once we get our studio space built, I'm sure we'll be able to have that. Let's have a button for it behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, guys, welcome. How we doing?
Very good.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you guys could join us. I'm a huge fan of what you guys do, and I love your reviews, and I'm glad to be able to talk to you. But for people who might not know who you guys are, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Go on, Robin.
I'll go first. About Dark Corners. Dark Corners it started off as like a bad movie review show, of which there are about 1 billion on YouTube. We like to think ours is. What do we like to think ours? How do we like to think ours is different? It's
it's more scripted than most. A lot of them are sort of just they'll riff about the movie in an unscripted way, while ours is very tightly scripted. But the channel itself, I think we brand it as the best and worst of classic genre cinema. So we're getting your terrible B movies, but also your classic horrors of your Universal, your Hammer era, and other things like that.
Yeah, we started off just doing the bad movie reviews, and it sort of evolved into other stuff that we were interested about, because it reached a point where we were just watching so many bad movies and talking about this stuff, and people didn't actually realize that we do actually like films. It's just not these ones. So yeah, we sort of grew in that direction, and yeah, it's proved a good move for us.
Yeah. So you guys have been doing these bad movie reviews, the Dark Corners reviews, for almost 10 years now, right?
We were just trying to decide that. The dates are a little bit fudged because the first series had a sort of different format. So it's whether or not we count that, but it's either sort of like 9 or 10 years, depending on when you count the start date.
So I mean, in 10 years, you guys have had to have seen a ton of bad movies, from probably the best of bad to the worst of bad.
So probably we've done over 500 bad movie reviews by now. So we're doing one a week. So over 10 years, that's a good 500.
I will say this. When I came across your YouTube channel, the first video I saw, I instantly fell in love with you guys, and then I went back, and it took me binging all of your videos. It took me almost a week to watch every single one, just going back to back.
We do. We have more reviews than subscribers.
That's a depressing statistic. I think that each review will pick up at least one.
You'd always hope. So we actually keep talking about your reviews and about bad movies. So why don't we actually take a look at one? The first one I want to take a look at, you guys, because you were kind enough to send over a whole bunch. We're going to start with what a lot of people would assume, just by looking at it, is going to be a bad movie. So why don't we take a look at your review of Blood Freak?
Basically, he just has to eat a lot of turkey to make sure the chemicals they give the birds aren't harmful to humans. Turns out they are. In fact...
So, yeah, if you came across that on TV, I'm sure that would be just awful.
Yes.
And it is.
I mean, it's the perfect Thanksgiving movie, that one.
So there's this really odd fascination that we have with bad movies, and because it's never gone away. No matter who you talk to, someone sees a movie so bad they go, "Oh man, you have to go check this out." Why do you guys think that happens? Why do bad movies persist so much?
I don't know to some degree. I know there are a lot of people who watch our channel who really, really love bad movies. I just think one of the secrets of Dark Corners, like one of the things we don't tell people, so this is an exclusive. I don't enjoy them. I think the people assume I do, and I mostly don't. But it's amazing how many people, as you say, sort of like will write in the comments or on Twitter or something, and they'll say, "Oh, this looks terrible. I have to find it." And I don't know if it's just that because often they can be funny. I mean, often they can also be incredibly boring. We cherry pick the funny bits. You don't want to sit through the whole thing. Sometimes I think it's almost disbelief that these things exist. And I also wonder sometimes if there's like a little bit of admiration, because it's easy for us to sit here and criticize, but I haven't made any movies recently, and however terrible these are, somebody went out and did something, and maybe that should be celebrated.
So yeah, it is. Robin and I have shot stuff before, and it's as difficult to make something good as it is to make something bad. And yeah, so I do have like a lot of admiration for these guys, especially like with your Ed Woods, who are so, they seem to really enjoy making films, and they just are no good at it. And that kind of passion for making something, or a director who's done like something like Deathbed, The Bed That Eats, that he had a vision for this film which is completely insane, and he made it. He made a film about a bed that eats people.
He had a dreamed that movie, and then went out and made it, and nothing happened. And then, like 20 years later, he discovered it had become a cult classic while his back was turned. A great story.
Yeah,
and I think you guys kind of hit on something really important. For me, at least, one of my hallmarks of a good bad movie is the people were putting their heart into it. They believed in what they were making, and they wanted to make something, and you can always see when that comes through, when the actors are there and people actually look like they're caring in a movie.
Yeah.
But Robin, you mentioned something about the sheer absurdity of something just existing or something being done, and there's another movie I want to take a quick look at that you guys were kind enough to send one of your clips over of a movie that, to look at it on the outside, you wonder why was this movie made? So if we could take a quick look at, if you guys, why don't we pull up Roar and take a look at that one?
Plus, the message of the film is wild animals are perfectly harmless, but every moment of it screams the opposite. Go! Ah! Or at least adds the caveat, if you don't piss about with them. They may just be playing, but you'll still be maimed.
It's a phenomenal film for that backstory of this guy who has these tigers and lions, brings his family in, and the amount of people who are hurt on set, and yet they just keep making this film.
The movie itself, I actually had come across that on TV one day, and I had no idea how that movie had gotten made, and it's sheerly absurd. But you're right. Like when the cast itself it's their family. They're the ones that own the park or the reserve, and you watch it and your brain just goes, why?
And you're seeing it in there. One of the lions bites his hand, and he's just bleeding from the hand. There's not to mention the guy who gets scalped. I think the director of photography got scalped by one of them.
Yeah, Melanie Griffith, of course, is one of the daughters in that. It's Tippi Hedren as the lead actress, and she was very badly injured by one of these. And why are you putting your children in this situation? But that is exactly what you were talking about, saying you want a good bad movie has that passion behind it, and this was a passion project. They really, really believed in it, and it ends up, as you see from that clip, it ends up with the exact opposite message to the one that they were going for, which I just find very funny.
And I think you might have mentioned it in the review, but towards the end of the clip, where you see that poor guy who is genuinely running away in terror as all of these massive cats are climbing over him, they put like jaunty music over it. As if to kind of say, no, it's fine. They're playing. They're just having fun.
Yeah.
But this is genuine terror. And didn't
You
Melanie...
can see it as well in the people, in the actors' eyes. You can see that when it's supposed to be playing, and you can see the tension and the fear. It's just, it's a really difficult film to watch, actually, just waiting for the next terrible thing to happen.
Yeah, I think there's a bit where Melanie Griffiths is getting mauled by one of the lions, and he's like calling out to her dad, who's I think directs it as well, and they just keep filming.
I can't, like, as an actor myself, I can't imagine where that line of safety versus story, like where it blurs. If that's people are important, because didn't she get her leg broken?
I can't remember exactly. Oh, Tippi Hedren did, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think was it an elephant that broke her leg?
Yes. There was something, I think, falling off the elephant.
It's just madness.
And
not to mention, with that film, I think a lot of the footage also accidentally got destroyed. So what's cut together at the end is just not even the film that was possibly intended.
So sometimes that's for better, sometimes that's for worse.
Well, and didn't the set burn down as well? It's a few years that it just everything was washed away. Was there a flood?
There was a flood, and I think there was also a fire. I think all the plagues were being put down on this film.
Nature just looked at what happened and said, no memories of this, please. We don't want this anymore. But that is kind of an example of a good bad movie, and just an absolutely bizarre movie. And I know you guys have seen so many, and like you mentioned, Robin, you do like movies. You guys do enjoy them. In fact, you guys have made some absolutely wonderful documentary pieces on some great. You guys have done ones on Hammer. You've also looked at movies that have otherwise been almost completely forgotten. One of my favorite ones you did is, everybody knows the Joker's design comes from a very particular picture, but not many people, even film students, not many people knew which one the design was from. But it was from the film called The Man Who Laughs. And admittedly, even as a film student, I hadn't heard of that one before, and I hadn't actually seen it. And you guys did this absolutely beautiful documentary about it, which I want to play a clip from real quick, and then we can talk about it. So if we could run that one from The Man Who Laughs.
Of all the cinematic sleights of hand used to make the unbalanced plot dramatic, Gwynplaine's horror of being laughed at is the best. For a silent film, it's perfect because it's visual, but it's also very believable of a character who has been laughed at his entire life.
So that movie, it like I said, admittedly, I hadn't even seen or heard about it, but the documentary that you put together framed it absolutely wonderfully and beautifully. And the clip you guys sent is just a fraction of how wonderful it is. And how do you guys feel movies like The Man Who Laughs and silent movies have had an impact on everything today?
Well, thank you for saying that. First of all, it's really nice to hear that you enjoyed it so much, and it's also kind of nice to hear that you weren't so familiar with it, because half the comments, we called that video Universal's Forgotten Classic, and half the comments are people saying it's not forgotten. But yeah, I think The Man Who Laughs is a great example of how silent film images do echo down through, not just through the Joker, but we talk about other films that it's influenced, and sometimes it's not like a conscious influence. Obviously, the Jokers are really, it's right there in your face. But I'm a huge silent film buff, and there's stuff that happens in silent film images. They just sort of transmit down through film history, I think, and it's not always in a very conscious way. It's interesting how these things can evolve, and as I'm talking, I'm trying to mentally come up with some really clever examples, but I think sometimes it's just an ethos. And so someone like Tim Burton obviously takes inspiration from that era, and it's nothing specific. It's just something in the way he shoots, in the way he has his characters act. Edward Scissorhands is a great example, one I think we mentioned in that video. But obviously, I mean, silent film is where it starts. All the rules of by 1930, the basic rules of cinema, how we edit, how we shoot, are pretty much in stone. There's not a lot of development after that point in terms of storytelling. There's technical developments, but the rules of storytelling are pretty much set by then, and you don't realize how much influence has come down.
Yeah, and this was a video that we put out, and we weren't expecting this one to do great numbers, and that's our most popular video, and it really took us by surprise in how successful that video did. That people do want to know about these more obscure, forgotten films and silent films, and I think while the bad movie market is well and truly covered, I think looking at some of these classics, perhaps not so much. So that was quite eye-opening for us, that we could do these more interesting documentaries about these films, and certainly sort of made us look at other ideas. We just did the review. What was the Japanese one we just did, Robin?
A Page of Madness.
Oh, that one was absolutely wonderful,
and fantastic film. And you're looking at it, and it's the sort of that filmic conventions that are in there from that long ago is incredible.
Because that was, did you say it was 26 in the review?
26, 27, something like that.
But yeah, you mentioned in the review of that one, it's all very kinetic. The camera movements are before Fritz Lang did similar things, and it's one of those ones that again, like, I really recommend that people go to the channel and check these out, because that is a really fascinating one to watch.
Yeah. Well, you've got sort of whip pans which are hiding cuts, which I haven't seen in other films of that era. I mean, Robin's seen far more, and he can probably give examples of things that blow that out of the water. But it's shots that you are not expecting in a film of that age.
Well, it's I think it's coming from a completely different tradition. An awful lot of Japan's silent cinema was destroyed during the firebombings in the Second World War. So there's very few films that survive. So it's hard to tell if it's like the first one to do these things. I kind of doubt it. It's not even the director's first film, but it's there as evidence that this stuff was around. And every time someone says sort of like when something was invented in film, then yeah, Graham's right. There'll always be someone to correct it. And so many techniques do come from the silent era, but that film's just a fantastic example. We just did it as a short streaming review. Maybe we should have done a big special on it, but I don't really know enough on Japanese silent cinema. It's a very specialist area. It's a fascinating film.
It really is. And you mentioned the streaming reviews, and that is something I want to touch on. Of course, this past year, the world broke, and people really couldn't go out and see movies, and they couldn't go out. And you guys found a way to bring movies that people may not have otherwise wanted to go see or had the chance to go see to their houses. There's the streaming reviews. You talked about one of the ones you guys mentioned in the streaming reviews was Your Name, the anime, which was, again, it was one of those movies that I had seen in passing and had kind of passed over and probably wasn't going to give it a second thought. But after you guys had suggested, I watched it, and it was absolutely beautiful. So how did the idea of the streaming reviews kind of come into play?
So when the world all changed, that basically killed a lot of the jobs that I was doing. So I said to Robin, maybe we do like these streaming ones as like a bit of extra content while we can't do anything else. Now, in fact, Robin's workload, I think, has stayed pretty much consistent. He does a lot of writing and things like that. And so it was more there we go, Robin, start doing this as well. And initially we started doing 2 a week, and then we pulled it back to 1 a week as we sort of went on. But that was the idea. It was like, oh, I've got more time on my hands. Let's see what we can do with this. And it's a nice little strand. They're faster to make than the other reviews because it's all voiceover led. So it's not quite so, you're not looking for all the jokes. You're just doing a straight up simple review. So it works as an extra video.
Yeah, I mean, my memory of it is very much sort of like when lockdown started. As Graham infers, it wasn't. It didn't affect my workload one bit because I already worked from home, so I still had the exact same amount of work to do. I just remember getting a text from Graham that let's triple your workload. all I saw. That's not what the text said. That's what I saw. But it's proved to be a really enjoyable thing to do because it is weird how quickly things have changed. But prior to, I'm not what you call a Luddite exactly, but I'm not comfortable around technology. Prior to lockdowns in this country, apart from for Dark Corners, I didn't really stream movies. I wasn't on Netflix. I just got Amazon so I could watch Good Omens and nothing else. Wasn't on any of the other streaming services. Now I watch every day, and the lockdown series that became Dark Corners streaming forced me to watch a lot of new movies I hadn't seen, and to discover that there's a lot of other, just not necessarily new ones, but just other movies that I hadn't seen that were available. And it's been nice sort of like doing something, because we can't really do a lot of world cinema with the regular Dark Corners, because we have this sort of call and response thing, and the subtitles don't work with that. So it would have to be dubbed if we do it at all. So it's nice to actually do sort of quality foreign language films as well. It's been really good for us.
Yeah.
And they're wonderful. And just as an aside, getting Amazon to watch Good Omens, completely reasonable. Absolutely completely reasonable. Wonderful show. I got the chance to meet Neil Gaiman once, and he was absolutely so sweet and so wonderful. And I just want to keep talking to him, but he is a person that has a life and won't just stand there and talk to me forever, which I guess I have to deal with. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm a huge Terry Pratchett fan, who was, of course, the other guy who wrote Good Omens, and one of the few celebrities whose death made me cry. And it was lovely to see the little nods to him that were in Good Omens and stuff. So it's an emotional watch.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where as soon as it was over, I started it over again, just to go back and rewatch everything. It's absolutely wonderful. But Robin, so you guys had also mentioned that, Robin, you do writing, and you actually have a number of books out. Why don't you tell us a little bit about those?
It's called. I did a series of books that was kind of, it sprang out of Dark Corners in a way. That I was a writer anyway, and in various areas. But I like writing novels, but the ones I've written, when I was going the traditional route of sending to agencies and publishers and stuff and getting knocked back. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. An awful lot of my writing, I do ghost writing, which I can't talk about a huge amount, but I was seeing those books being put out on Kindle and stuff, and just and selling. I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to find a way of doing books that I can turn out relatively quickly, just rather than the sort of the grand novels that tend to take years to do and maybe are massively overwritten. So you sort of give yourself a little time scale. And and because of Dark Corners, I sort of knew I had kind of a ready-made audience of people who'd be interested in tongue-in-cheek horror stories. And it was around the time that Universal was talking about rebooting their films with the Dark Universe. And they'd announced that The Mummy was coming out. So I thought, okay, I know they're going to screw it up, so I'm going to do my version of a modern mummy story that's kind of pays tribute to the classics, but is still its own thing. And that sort of gave me the impetus, and that was the first one. And my idea initially had been to release books along with Universal, but The Mummy did so badly that they obviously changed tack completely. And they've had some recent success with The Invisible Man, but that's of course going in a completely different direction to the Dark Universe. But But my books continue, and there's now 4 of them, and I release them one a year. There'll be another one out in October, just sort of trying to catch the Christmas market. And I am very proud of them. They have and it's nice to just be able to release online, and they find an audience, and the people, they're not selling in massive numbers, but the people who read them seem to enjoy them, and they got some lovely reviews on there. So yeah, I'm pleased, and they exist, and if you'd like to check them out, that would be great.
Yeah, I do. They haven't shipped yet, unfortunately. I wanted to be able to have at least read one of them before we talked, but they haven't gotten here yet.
You should do one before Grant bothers.
I look forward to reading them. And the titles are them. They are
The Mummy's Quest, The Werewolf of Priory Grange, The Vengeance of the Invisible Man, and The Immortal Dracula. And the new one will be The Golem of 2020, hopefully. Touch wood.
I do look forward to reading them. I genuinely do. So we've talked about a lot of bad movies so far. We talked about a few good movies, but the inspiration for these books came from all of the old Universal monster movies. But you guys are also fans of Hammer. And I think Hammer movies, they have a very special place in history. And I'm sure you guys would agree with that.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
They're, sorry, Graham, do you?
No, go ahead. You go.
Oh, I was just rabbiting on again. But yeah, I think they sort of reclaim horror a little bit. There's some, or the classic horrors. And of course, they're the first horror films that all the first mainstream horror films done in color. First color Frankenstein and Dracula and that. And I think I was just struggling to think when we did one of our specials about that, I'm not sure which, that we mentioned that it's probably outside of animation, Hammer is probably the only studio where you go to see a Hammer film. You're not going to see because of the actor or the director or even the subject matter. You go to see a Hammer film. And I don't think that happens with anything other than animation and Hammer.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I've never heard it put that way, but that is absolutely right. And you guys have done some wonderful pieces about Hammer, and of course, Hammer was that's how I cut my teeth on horror. My dad specifically said, hey, you need to watch this movie. And it was the first one that I saw was Vincent Price, I believe it was Pit and the Pendulum. And I immediately just fell in love with that whole feel. Because if you sit and watch the Hammer movies, you recognize the sets, you recognize the actors, all the pieces are there. But
it's not Hammer, but the Pit and the Pendulum. But
oh no, I'm wrong.
But it has a similar ethos, and of course, I think some of the same actors. Maybe I think Hazel Court might be in. I'm not sure, but no, that's one of Roger Corman's ones, the Poe ones.
Oh, now where's my card?
I think it's up there rather than letting.
I have to go hand in my film card. No, this is terrible.
I wasn't going to say anything because I wasn't so sure as Robin. I was like, I don't think that's Hammer. I don't remember them doing Pit and Pendulum.
I will admit when I'm wrong, and now I have to make penance now.
But another great film, Pit and the Pendulum, and they do have very similar ethos, certainly.
But if I will save a little bit of face and say that was my doorway into Hammer.
I thought that was where you were going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we'll just edit that out. We're not going to edit it, but we'll just edit that out and say it was my doorway into Hammer. But you're absolutely right. The Hammer films are genuinely wonderful, and you guys again have done a look at those. So what I want to do is I want to play a quick clip of looking at the Christopher Lee Hammer documentary that you guys have put together.
Dracula, or Horror of Dracula as it was released in America, remains a confident and chilling first outing.
I heard you call me, Aunt Lucy.
Yes, dear.
Abandoning the stately slowness of past versions to create what film historian Kim Newman called a swashbuckler with some shocks, Dracula flies to an action-packed climax as Lee and Cushing finally face off before the shocking finale, which can now be viewed with previously censored footage restored.
So all of those movies, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, you watch those movies and it just feels like, personally for me, it feels like fun, and it feels like you're kind of hanging out with family, if that makes sense.
I think very much so. I think from all the stuff we read or interviews that you see with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, Hammer was very much a family for those guys. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing just care for each other so much. It's always really touching when you're seeing those two interact off camera or talk about each other. And I think, that sort of camaraderie, like repertory theatre, you really sort of see in those films.
Very much so. It's keep thinking when we do another Hammer one, it would be really nice to sort of talk about the backroom guys a little bit more. We've talked about them a bit, but I think mostly hit the big names. But there are people who just did film after film after film, and so it must have been lovely for the actors like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing to come back and see all these familiar faces. There's the same people behind the scenes on each film. They really were, like you say, a family. And when you go and watch the films, then there is that sort of comfortable feeling almost of going home. It's just like, we're back. It's welcome.
Almost to the detriment of Christopher Lee, who would have quit Dracula much sooner had it not been for all the people who would have lost their jobs if he didn't do another Dracula film. So, he cared more about the people than he did about the films. The latter ones, at least.
Christopher Lee himself is one of those actors that has just, again, like the more you learn about his history and background, the crazier it is. You always see him and you envision him on screen as, Dracula, the classic movie monsters, just these big imposing characters. But then you learn about his history, his time in the army and the secret missions he did. And there's almost kind of this weird disconnect where you don't quite want to believe that, but at the same time, you can see it and go, yeah, I could absolutely see that.
Yeah, and that's it. He wasn't far off being a real life James Bond back in the day,
It's true, but then you hear all that stuff, and then there's a lovely story that when he used to call Peter Cushing, because Cushing didn't necessarily want people he got called by fans who he wouldn't necessarily want to speak to. Then their sort of code for speaking to each other was he put on voices of cartoon characters like Daffy Duck and the Warner
Sylvester
Brothers
and Tweety Pie.
Yeah,
Tweety Pie, I think, is a big
and
one.
they do these bits between them, and it's sort of putting those two people together: the war hero who's like the dark knight of cinema, and this guy doing Sylvester the cat.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that I wish I could have been there to see. Like, you hear the stories and you wish you could have witnessed it. There is also that other very famous story about Christopher Lee when he was on the set of Lord of the Rings, and when his character, and I always mispronounce it because of old speech impediment as a kid, but the evil wizard he's playing, he gets stabbed in the back, and Peter Jackson's like, you need to scream, you need to make this sound. So Christopher Lee just turns and goes, that's not what it sounds like when someone gets stabbed in the back. It sounds like this. And Peter Jackson's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he's drawing on real experience of having stabbed a few people in the back.
But it's little stories like that just add these tiny touches when you watch certain things. And we also talked a bit about Peter Cushing, and you guys did again a wonderful look at him and his history of Frankenstein. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at that one? And I think that might be the last, no, not quite the last clip that we have for you guys, but it's close. Let's take a look at the Frankenstein documentary that you guys did.
Watching the films together, it becomes apparent that, while story continuity is practically non-existent, Cushing's Frankenstein has described a recognizable arc from youthful ambition,
Paul, come and see what I've got. Elizabeth, we'll see you at dinner.
through thwarted vengeance,
I swore I would have my revenge.
into a pursuit of ever more dangerous goals, the tragic end of which drives him to cold-blooded brutality, and on into madness.
You see. I like that.
I think that's my favourite that we've done.
Yeah, as I really like that montage of seeing all of those films, because it kind of, although some of them are much better than others, I think when we put them all together like that, and you see that there is some kind of arc and development of the character, and Peter Cushing is an actor who really put a lot of thought into how his characters were being portrayed. His scripts would be scribbled over with notes about everything from how they sit. I think it really just comes across that sort of dedication he has as an actor.
Yeah, I like that documentary because it, we came to the documentaries. I don't know how long we've been doing those now. The bigger things, maybe 5 or 6 years, but we were sort of learning by doing. And the early ones we've done have been very much sort of this film happened, then this film happened, then this film happened. I think that's the first one where we tried to tell like a recognizable story within the documentary. So it's about the Hammer Frankenstein, but it's also about Peter Cushing, and it's about Hammer Studios, because the Frankenstein films kind of chart that rise and fall in quite a convenient way. That sort of like the rises in the franchise coincide with when Hammer's doing well. So it was just it's. I think we've tried to do that since, but I'm not sure we've ever got it quite that perfect. Or maybe I just have a lot of affection for that one because it's the first time I feel like we really got it right. But yeah. I think that one.
I think it comes together really well at the end, sort of the wrapping up of it.
Yeah, and again, it's wonderful. And Peter Cushing, again, he's one of those actors that you hear all these stories about, and he's one of those actors where you could give him one of the worst lines ever written, and he would find a way to make it sound like the most profound thing in the world.
It's true. I mean, he's featured in our bad movie reviews as well, and we've done one called The Blood Beast Terror that he said was the worst film he was ever in, but he's still playing a character. He's still put the time in, and it's a character that is recognizably different from Frankenstein or Van Helsing or whatever else you've seen him do. He took it very seriously, even when he knew it was bad, he took it seriously. I really admire him as an actor. He is brilliant, and
by all accounts, as a honestly, genuinely amazing human being.
Yeah.
That I think, again, go back, you watch interviews with Christopher Lee talking about Peter Cushing, and you see how much this man meant to him, how much he idolized him, because of this genuine, really good heart that this man had, and the dedication to his craft.
Yeah, nobody has a bad word to say about Peter Cushing. I can't remember where I read it. I was reading something recently, and it was an interview with one of the sort of the more glamorous actors that they'd used in Hammer films, and I think it might have been Kate O'Mara. And Cushing had asked had offered to take her to the cinema one night or the theatre or something. She said he turned up, and they went out together, and he bought dinner, and he was completely courteous and a gentleman at all times. And he had no interest in her. His wife had died recently. He was lonely. He enjoyed her company. That was genuinely it. And you just think when you think of sort of like Me Too and going on stuff like this going on at the moment, how rare that would have been in the 70s for an actor like Kate O'Mara or any of the ones that Hammer used. They must have had a really rough time of it, I would think. The sort of the glamour girls in that time, to have someone like Peter Cushing who would behave like that. And she's not the only one who tells stories like that. He was just a proper gentleman, like a very old-fashioned gentleman. Lovely guy. Yeah. Need more people like Peter Cushing in the film industry.
I can't agree more. I cannot agree more. So we talk about Hammer itself, and you mentioned like a Hammer feel and going home. And do you think that movies or movie companies can ever recapture that kind of feeling, or do you think we've gotten to a point where that can't happen again?
Oh, we reviewed the Elementary, which has a very sort of Hammer feel to it. So I think that sort of influence of Hammer still carries on. But in terms of studios having that family feel, I don't know that exists as much anymore. People move around. I mean, to some degree, although the films, make of it what you will, but I would say that Marvel seems to have a very tight family group that everyone seems to really enjoy working together on those films, and you're bringing in a lot more new talent, but a lot of the guys are also staying there. So I'd say that was like a sort of a good example of a studio which is, got a strong family feel to it.
I don't know. Outside of animation, I think it's pretty hard to get that sort of little feel, because apart from anything else, you mentioned the Marvel ones, but how many thousand people work on any given Marvel film? It's just not the same. I think I would never say never, though. I would think that, and this may happen more in other countries where the film industries are a little bit smaller and more close knit. I don't see that there's any reason that someone shouldn't try and work in that way. As long as you have the product at the end of it, if you produce something that people want to see, then I think you can get back to that. And in the end, I will always believe that what matters is the story and the script and this. And I don't really care if the effects are a bit ropey in that. And I think that most audiences don't. It's just about getting it out there. And if people will see it and enjoy it, then it can happen again.
Yeah, I think in modern times it might be a bit more difficult, because I was thinking about this before our interview, and I was trying to find a contemporary feel for Hammer. I grew up in a theater, and when you watch all the Hammer movies, you see that same staircase, that same set, that same wibbly hallway. It's comfortable, it's familiar, and you like it. And I was trying to find any kind of lateral contemporary, and the only one that I could have come across was the early Kung Fu movies, because all of those guys started in Chinese opera classes. So Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, all the guys that created what are Kung Fu movies today, they all started in the same thing. And if you watch all of that era, you do get that kind of familiar feel, because they all knew each other and they all knew the same dances and the same moves that became what fights were.
Yeah.
That's very true.
And that's we've not touched on any of that stuff yet, but I think that will be something down the line I think we want to look at, is the Jackie Chan films, because I think we both like Jackie Chan, don't we?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The Kung Fu reviews we've done have never done very well, but
yeah,
those are all bad movie reviews, so maybe a special that would do better.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating history of how they all came together, going from the opera classes to the fights, because as film was coming in, they wanted to make everything better, and because fighting is dancing essentially. And when your choreography for the fight is you have to hit this beat and this beat and this beat, and then it became a matter of let's try to top what they did, and hey, we have this move from the dance that'll look really good on film, and how it evolved into that, and how Jackie Chan became kind of the first action star that did everything himself.
Yeah.
Is just such an interesting arc and story.
Yeah. He also singing the theme.
I was going to say he also, I think he takes the hero in a different and much more interesting direction than a lot of contemporary movies, in that so many heroes, and this still happens now, are indestructible. They never seem to get a scratch on them or anything. And he gets the crap kicked out of him. He gets as good as he gives. And it made for a very different hero to that. I have a running thing on Dark Corners of just despising the heroes. They're all just too... They really set my teeth on edge. And Jackie Chan feels like the antithesis of that, sort of bringing in a hero who you can identify with, because he does, but he suffers to win. And I think that's so much better. The other thing, just quickly mention, as long as I'm rambling, because at the start of this, we talked about how silent film has influenced modern cinema, and Jackie Chan is a great example because he himself will cite Buster Keaton, and has actually referenced some of Buster Keaton's set pieces. So, and they're two filmmakers who couldn't be very much more different, except that they both happen to do their own stunts, and so that influence filters down into a very different type of movie.
And Buster Keaton also, he did his own stunts missing a finger. In most of his movies, you actually see, if you look closely, he's wearing a white glove over his right hand because he was, I believe it was juggling fireworks.
I'm going to correct you again.
Yeah.
Harold Lloyd.
Ah, wow. Where is my card? I found my card.
We're never going to be allowed back on this show because I've come across as I think you'll find it was Harold Lloyd. But yeah, Lloyd was doing a photo shoot holding what was supposed to be, it was meant to be a prop bomb. And it went off and took his thumb, index finger, and part of his middle finger. And yeah, you're quite right. You can see when he's hanging off the clock in Safety Last, you can see he's holding up his left hand, and the right is just this rubber thing just there. It's not holding anything. Keaton was missing the joint, one of the joints on his index finger, I think on his right hand. So although it doesn't affect him quite in the same way, whenever you see a close-up of his hand, that's a hand double, which is practically the only time that Buster Keaton ever used a double. I didn't expect to be talking about Buster Keaton today, but
See, this is I know the areas where I will just leave Robin to where his expertise is, and I will just, like, if you're talking about the silent film or pretty much anything older, Robin just is encyclopedic knowledge of all of this stuff.
No.
So basically,
compared to us immortals.
If we start talking about Metropolis, you'll just go grab yourself a drink.
Yeah.
Have we got time to talk about Metropolis?
We can talk about Metropolis if we want, but again, before we do, I'll admit that I was wrong.
I'm sorry.
No, I've always said, and I always do say in my shows, if I misquote something or misremember something or say that I'm wrong, by all means correct me. I'm not an expert just because I'm in front of a camera or in front of a crowd. And I always try to leave it open. So please, if I'm wrong, let me know.
We get corrected on our videos a lot, and frankly, I always take it personally.
Well, we had a video that went out to.
I always say thank you for letting us know, and then secretly hate the person forever.
Because we had a video, the videos go out to our Patreons early, so if you want to support us on Patreon, there's a little perk. And somebody pointed out a mistake. I called Robin up and go, "Do you want to re-record that line before we put it out publicly?"
Yeah, with hours to spare, we changed the line because I got it wrong.
Yeah. So now no one's none the wiser. They all think Robin's. We fix the errors in post.
Oh God! You said fix it in post. I just had a whole series of nightmares. Because Graham, you mentioned you do a lot of editing, and you know that the phrase "fix it in post" is it's essentially code for "I need a miracle."
Yeah, it's like we're not gonna, or it's just like laziness on set. Okay, yeah, we could do this in like 5 minutes on set, but we can fix it in post, and it's going to take you 4 hours.
Yeah, you know what it's like. You get handed an SD card that's got 4 hours of footage, and they say we need a 3-minute video. Make it work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hate editing other people's stuff that other people have shot. At least if I've shot it, I know what I've got, and I've already sort of figured out anything that I'll fix in post as how I'll do it.
So there is so much more I do want to talk about with you guys. Unfortunately, I'm being told that we're just about out of time. So again, like, if you guys would love to come back, we can talk about Metropolis. We can talk more about bad movies and good movies and all that. We still have more questions and clips, and we can just do that another time. In the meantime, though, where can all of our people see you? Where can we see your reviews and find your books and all that?
Excellent. So the channel is Dark Corners Reviews. So just search for that on YouTube. Then follow us on Twitter at Dark Corners 3 and at Robin Bales. And then Robin can do his books.
The books are on Amazon. They're part of the Universal Library series.
So just search for Robin Bales.
That's probably easier.
It's the fastest way to find them. Yeah.
Like you've ever looked.
Yes. I've not read them either.
Just tell him they're in your cart. It's fine.
Graham did a house recently, and that's what he's getting for a housewarming gift. Set of my books.
Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and
you.
talk with us today. This is absolutely fantastic. I would love to have you guys back. I know there's so much more we can talk about. But for now, we are out of time. So everyone, on behalf of my guests, I have been your host, Scott J. Carroll. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.